yeah, so as Anna said, we're giving like a 4-part presentation, and I think we'll just get started so that we don't run over time. Yeah, Tessa. Okay, so just a few objectives for today's session is firstly to get an understanding of unaccompanied asylum seeking young people in that are in our care. Also to gain an understanding of the different backgrounds of unaccompanied asylum seeking children. So we'll look a bit about their home countries, where they come from, culture, religion, reasons for why they seek asylum in the first place. And we'll also look at how a young person's background and their experiences will impact their engagement in education. A few housekeeping rules is if you could just all mute yourself unless you are speaking, just so we don't get any feedback. If you have any questions, maybe just type them, because Tessa can't see the screen, and then I'll just keep a tab on whoever's asked a question. And we are filming this so that it could be shared with other teachers, I think. So if you have any objectives, then you could let us know now. Otherwise, we'll just go straight into it. Yeah.
So just touching a bit on what Anna's already spoken about. So as of April 2021, Surrey County Council had 80 under 18s within their care and 311 18 plus unaccompanied asylum seeking or former unaccompanied asylum seeking young people. I don't know if all of you will be aware, but quite recently Surrey have changed their structure of care for their unaccompanied asylum seeking young people. So they've got specialised teams that the young people will go within. So most of those under 18 sit within a specialised looked after children's team that comprise of social workers. And then those over 18 sit within 2 specialist care leavers teams that comprise of personal advisors. So this is just to show you sort of how many young people we have living in and out of Surrey. So this is specifically for our unaccompanied asylum seekers again. So this is as of July 2020, 43% of our looked after children were living in county, with 57% out of county. And then this drops down quite a lot for our care leavers. So 24% are in county and 76% out of county. And then just briefly to touch on the demographics of our unaccompanied asylum seeking young people. So this table here shows you by nationality and sex of how many young people we have. So you'll see that by far we have mostly Eritrean young people. I think, again, this data is as of July 2020, but I think currently about a third of our young people are Eritreans. This drops down quite far and then is followed by our Afghans, Iranians, Sudanese young people, and those from Iraq. And you can also see that our female Eritreans are the highest amount of females that we have also within our care. And then this sort of mirrors what Anna was saying in terms of how many young people I suppose that you might come into contact with in your work. So this is again as of July 2020. That's when the migration project started. So the data that we had abstracted at the time. But those who were 14 at the time, there were only 2, and then 8 15-year-olds. But I know that this varies from time to time, and we can get some people as young as 12 that come into our care. So we're going to have a look at the 3 countries that are the highest amount of young people that we have. So we'll have a look at Eritrea first of all, we'll have a look at Afghanistan, and we'll have a look at Iraq. We'll have a look at their sort of politics, any conflict that may be ongoing in the country, their religion and culture, and their education, and the reasons for claiming asylum. So hopefully that will help give you a bit of understanding about the sort of things that they go through and the experiences that they have, and we'll then have a chat at the end about how that will impact potentially on their engagement in education here in the UK. So the state of Eritrea is in North East Africa. The capital is Asmara. The major languages that they speak are Tigrinya, Tigray, Arabic and English. and the major religions are Islam and Christianity. Their life expectancy is 63 years old for men and 67 years old for women. So there's been quite a lot of political background within Eritrea. So it was ruled by Italy until the end of the World War II, and then the British until 1951. The British proposed that Eritrea should be divided along religious lines, with Christians going into Ethiopia and the Muslim side of Eritrea to Sudan. However, the UN decided that Eritrea should be given to Ethiopia, and this has caused quite a lot of conflict. So the Eritrean War of Independence was a 30-year-long conflict fought between the Ethiopian government and Eritrea, and independence fighters from September 1961 to May 1991. So ever since the end of this war, the People's Front for Democracy and Justice, the political party, has been in power, and it's the only political party that's legally permitted to exist in Eritrea. So it's got a single party presidential system, and the president serves as both the head of state and the head of government, and he's been in position ever since they've been independent in 1993. They're a very oppressive government, and it's quite difficult living within Eritrea, as we'll go on to discuss. So the Eritrean-Ethiopian War has also been a conflict that's taken place and has been quite prominent, you've probably seen in the press as well in recent times. So it's a conflict that took place between Ethiopia and Eritrea from May 1998 to June 2000, with the final peace only agreed in 2018. However, conflict still does continue to happen. And then another big factor that affects a lot of our young people that come to the UK is their national service system. So there's compulsory national service since 1995 following the border war. It's an 18-month subscription initially, but however, this was increased to indefinite service after the border war. So there are people within Eritrea that have been having to be within the national service, giving national service for over 20 years now. Both males and females are conscripted into the military, and former conscripts compare the national service to modern day slavery. They suffer from forced labour, torture, ill treatment, arbitrary arrests, and lack basic sanitation and hygiene. The UN have sort of openly admitted that crimes for humanity have been performed within national service, and it's a very big thing that impacts our young people, and as we're going to talk about, impacts their education. So just briefly to touch on religion within Eritrea. So the population of Eritrea is equally divided between Christians and Muslims, and they live within different regions of Eritrea. However, Eritrea only recognise, I think it's 4 or 5 religions, sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. They sort of, anybody who
Oh no, I see we've lost Tessa again.
Oh, right. I thought I was the one frozen.
Sorry, Shahan, is it all right to take over for a moment until we get Tessa back?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Sorry, guys.
So,
without
back. Sorry, Tessa, you froze. You're back now.
am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
Oh, sorry, do I keep cutting out? Is it okay?
No, you just cut off that once. Yeah. It's
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Where did you hear up to?
Eritrea has 5 other religions.
Okay, yeah, so 4 or 5 that they recognise, but the government won't recognise any other religions. So some other religious groups have put in applications to be recognised religious groups, but they won't accept that. So it would be difficult for anybody who wants to follow other religions or has other beliefs. a little bit to touch on their culture. So the Independence Day is the most important day for most Eritreans. This is the 24th of May. 75% of the population lives in rural areas and conducts agricultural production, and only 20% of people are estimated to be trade and workers. So the National Service has a big impact on this because they subscribe so many people for such a long period of time. It really affects their agricultural production, and it really affects their harvesting seasons, and they often have food shortages due to this. And then just to go back to, or to touch on education, but this will also go back to national service. So data on education is really outdated. Since 2009, the Eritrean government won't allow journalists into the country, and sort of won't allow reports or, you know, anybody to come in to see what's going on. So the only information that's up to date that they have are from people who have fled and left the country. So education in Eritrea is compulsory, but the data that is, you know, is out there suggests that there's really low levels of attendance to school. So between 39 and 50.
Oh. Am I frozen or Tessa?
No, I think we've lost
Nice.
her again.
Okay, I'll just carry on. So going back to what Tessa was just saying, so education is compulsory, but only between 39 and 57% of school-age children actually attend primary school, and
57.
Oh, Tessa, you were frozen. Only 21% attended secondary school. So the school rates are quite low, and part of that's because I think a lot of the young people we see, they come from like really rural areas, and they tend to go towards agriculture. Learning hours at school are often less than 4 hours per day. So the skill shortages are present at all levels of the education system, and funding and access to education varies by gender. A lot of girls, their dropout rates are higher, and obviously it depends on where you're from as well. I think especially in the rural areas, it's less common to just, you know, consistently stay at school. Yeah, I don't know where Tessa got. Tessa, where did you get that quote from? I'm not sure.
The quote is from a UN report. So I can share the link at the end of the report. It's quite an interesting report to read.
Okay. So yeah, I think it just kind of gives you an idea of what they see as how they view education. And I think from like experience of working with young people, depending on like whether your parents are educated as well and they've stayed in education, and your economic situation, it kind of shows whether you're going to end up staying in school for longer or not. Yeah, should we go on to the next slide? So some of the reasons for why Eritreans claim asylum are mainly their fear of conscribing for the national service. So if the Home Office decide to send a young person from Eritrea back, they will on the border they have I forgot what it's called, but they'll just shoot you then and there. There's a word for it, but sorry, I forgot what it's called. And yeah, they have a right to shoot, like if they just see you, because you're seen as going against what the country requires you to do. So it's actually quite difficult. You don't I haven't heard of many Eritreans being sent back. There's also because they have a fear of persecution or harm by the state because of their faith, or if they are from a certain religious group or tribe, maybe. And also in general, the state is very oppressive. So there's loads of things to do with human rights being violated. They don't have much freedom, not many opportunities to get ahead, and if the state believes you to be doing something that's against them, then you might get arrested and put into detention. But yeah, those are some of the reasons that Eritreans claim asylum in the UK. Should we move on? Another country that we're looking at, which is where a lot of our young people are from, is Afghanistan. So the capital of Afghanistan is Kabul, and the major languages that you'll see your young people speaking are Pashto and Dari. Dari and Farsi are similar, so they'll speak either one of the dialects. They are two different ethnic groups. You'll see some young people from certain areas, it will be predominantly Pashtun, and then other areas are Tajik. So Tajiks are the ones that speak Dari. The main religion in Afghanistan is Islam, and yeah, Afghanistan is an Islamic republic, so most of the citizens follow Islam. There are like a minority of other religions, but most of them have left the country, or they're already like being scrutinized for their religion. So you do get like a small population of Sikh. There was a few Jewish, but they ended up leaving Afghanistan. So yeah. Under the Taliban rule, there isn't like the freedom to practice other religions. So as I said, that's why most of the other groups have actually left the country. And there's a lot of discrimination against non-Muslims. It has become very like religious, especially when the Taliban came under rule. Otherwise, before that, it was very like liberal, and part of it was because the communists from Russia were mixed in Afghanistan, so they kind of had that open liberal approach. But when the Taliban came in, it became very it became a lot more strict. A lot of the popular activities are mainly cricket and football, so a lot of it's cricket, and their weekend is only on a Friday. Because it's it's a religious day, so otherwise we get like Eid, and the New Year is actually in on the 20th of March. So that New Year is for Iranians, Kurdish, and Afghans. It's just certain people from I think for Turkish as well, but for certain people that is what's counted as the New Year. They don't have the New Year as first of first like in European countries do. Yeah, should we go on to the next slide? So in terms of the politics, the nation is currently led by President Ashraf Ghani, who is backed by two vice presidents. And Afghanistan, the country has been influenced by NATO countries, particularly the United States, who have tried to stabilize and democratize the country. There's still, even though that is what's said on paper, a lot of the Taliban are still involved in certain parts of the government, because they've tried to work together to try bring peace to the country. The civil war has like gone on for I think over 40 years now. And part of it's because Taliban don't want USA to have like full control, and so the Afghan government kind of has to work with both to try and make something work, but realistically nothing has worked. So it's gone on for years and years. They've been having like peace talks for the past from what I remember, for the past 5 years, and there hasn't been any solution. if anything, I think under the new president, the situation has gotten worse. You'll see a lot more like suicide attacks, and ISIS came into Afghanistan as well. So yeah, I don't think much has changed. Official US government estimates that as of 2019, only 53.8% of Afghan districts are under government control, and the remaining 12.3 are under the influence of Taliban. I mean, in some areas, so even if you get like a specific city that's under the control of the US government, or the Afghan government, you will still find other maybe villages or something that are under influence by Taliban. The US have pledged to leave Afghanistan and return. Taliban pledged to prevent territory under their control from being used by terrorist groups, and they went into negotiations in March 2020. The agreement was signed following a 7-day reduction in violence, in which the Taliban had to agree to significant and nationwide reduction in violence. But they've agreed it. They might have agreed it on paper, but I don't think in practice it's actually happened. So just looking at below, there's still no official ceasefire in place. Especially in the last 2 to 3 years, the violence has increased, and there's a lot more like airstrikes and raids which target the Taliban, and then in essence it affects a lot of the civilians, because what the Taliban do is they go into civilian led areas, so they'll be hiding in like just very remote places where it's like small villages and things like that, where there's a lot of kids and families just residing, so they won't be in places where it's like completely like isolated. And yeah, the Taliban have carried out high-profile attacks across the country, including in Kabul. Kabul is a place that they have suicide attacks, I think weekly. I hear about it weekly because I'm Afghan, so my parents are constantly watching the news, and we hear about things happening weekly. I don't remember the last time something happened or something hadn't happened, and if anything, it just seems to get worse and worse. A few years you'd hear like airstrikes happen here and there, but now it's gotten so bad where last year they targeted like a maternity ward, so loads of new mums and kids lost their lives. Schools are being targeted, wedding venues, that kind of thing. I think maybe it's just to make more of a point or whatever it is, but yeah, it's gotten worse in the last few years. Should we go on to the next slide? So in terms of education, between 1933 and 1973, steps were being taken in Afghanistan to improve access to education, and they made some improvements, but beginning with the Soviet invasion, they were actually destroyed. So many teachers fled, and schools were either destroyed or used as bunkers. In 1996, the Taliban regime restricted education for females, and madrasas became the main source of like education for a lot of children. A lot of our young people, you will see, because they come from rural areas, you'll hear that they've never been to any form of education. They've just been to madrasas. So a lot of them will just have like an Islamic schooling, and madrasas mainly just teach you how to read the Quran sometimes without even interpretation. It's just for them to learn how to pray and read Arabic, even if they don't understand what they're reading, they're just reading it. And it can be quite like a cruel place as well. So if you don't, abide by it, like teachers in those schools in Afghanistan, they'll hit you. They're allowed to use like force and things like that. And with girls, it's like especially in villages and not the city like Kabul, it's not as common for girls to go to education. or even madrasas, they'll just be at home most of the time. Currently, an estimated 3.7 million children are out of school in Afghanistan. 60% of them are girls. The main reasons relating to schools, the main reasons are based on the school's location, lack of transport, parental fear of their safety, lack of qualified teachers. A lot of the teachers don't actually have the minimum academic qualifications, and also girls' access to education is impacted by insecurity and the traditional norms and practices and what their role is in society. A lot of girls get married off really young, especially in Pashtun culture. It's a very like tribal culture. So if the family hasn't like spent time in the city, the girls might even be, you know, married off when they're still like children, and their role is, yeah, it's a very like male-led society. So men are kind of, you know, the breadwinner and do everything for them, and then the females just stay at home, and they get married really young. They have kids really young as well. So there's an issue with the mortality rate for like young mums as well, especially because there's like lack of hospitals nearby and things like that. But yeah, I mean, with Afghans, you'll see that if you have a young Afghan UASC in your class, it will always be male. I've never seen females come in. Any female you have, if you're teaching, it will probably be through like family reunion, because it's not even in question whether a female can travel outside on their own. Mainly it's like the boys that get sent away for safety. Yeah. Should we go on to the next slide? So there's several reasons for why Afghans claim asylum. Some of it will be anti-government elements, so they have a fear of persecution because of the government. It might be because of the security and humanitarian situation. It might be women fearing gender-based violence, if they have a different sexual orientation, if they're Sikh or Hindu, so if they're from a different religious group, if they're Hazara. So Hazaras are descendants from Mongols, so they look very different to it's another ethnic group that we have in Afghanistan, but they look very different to like Pashtuns and Tajiks. So because of that difference, they can sometimes be persecuted. And back in the day, like in the 90s or 80s, they were seen as like lower class citizens even. So yeah, you might get young people claiming asylum based on that. What we see often is if they're an unaccompanied child. So if the child is at risk of persecution by the state, or, you know, if it's the Taliban and they have no support to be sent back. And also you get some Afghans who are perceived as too westernized, because it's a very strict culture back in Afghanistan. So if you become accustomed to the way of life that is here, you might be seen as too westernized, so it's unsafe for you to be sent back. Yeah. The next country we'll look at is Iran. So some of it's so what we'll see a lot of young people from Iran are mainly Kurdish Iranian. We do get some young people from Iran that are from that are not Kurdish and just, you know, Persian Iranian. So the main languages in Iran are Farsi, but there's a lot of Kurdish in Iran. They might speak Arabic or Azerbaijani. The major religions is Islam, and there were other religions such as Zoroastrianism and Christianity and Judaism. Zoroastrianism used to be like the main religion in Iran, but then it changed to Islam. What's that word? Basically, Iran follows Sharia law. So similar to Afghanistan, they both follow Sharia law. So a lot of the reasons for claiming asylum will be similar to Afghanistan. 99% of Iranians believe in Islam. So the rest of the population believe in other recognized minority religions such as Christianity, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism. But some religions are not even recognized by the Iranian government, and apostasy from Islam will subject you to capital punishment. So yeah, it's quite, I mean, similar to a lot of like strict Muslim countries like Afghanistan and Iran. Apostasy is just it could lead to, it will lead to capital punishment if you're caught. Yeah, should we go on to the next slide? Sorry, my throat's getting a bit dry. Thanks. So in terms of conflict, the Iran-Israel conflict was between Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Iran. In recent years, this has included attacking ships, airstrikes, and cyber warfare attacks. In between 2019 and 2021, the Persian Gulf crisis is the ongoing state of heightened military tensions between Iran and the United States and its allies in the Persian Gulf region. Iran has a democratically elected president, and it has an assembly of experts and local councils. According to the constitution, all candidates running for these positions must be vetted by the Guardian Council before being elected. In addition, there are representatives elected from appointed organizations. Usually they're the supreme leaders controlled to protect the state's Islamic character. In terms of education, school from the age of 7 to 15 is free and mandatory in Iran. Although that is the case, depending on what ethnic group you are and where you're from, and if you're living in Iran, that might not, you might be excluded from that. So, for example, some Kurdish, they might be excluded from being allowed to go to school. I know Afghan refugees in Iran, they're just not allowed to go to school. It's almost as if you're stateless. So you could be brought up, you could be born there and, you know, only have known Iran as your whole life, but you still won't have the right to do certain things like have a job and have a passport and yeah, things like that. So kind of like you're kind of stateless in some sense. Yeah, so should we go on to the next slide? So some of the reasons for why Iranians claim asylum, a lot of it's like with honor-based violence, or if they have seen forced marriages, or if they have to conscribe to the military, if they have a different sexual orientation and gender, they might not want to, they might have reverted to a different religion and, you know, they can't return. So we have had some young people who have converted to Christianity and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's similar to Eritrea in some sense. It's also a very oppressive state. So we'll see a lot of like Iranians in the UK who are against the government and don't agree with how it is, so they've claimed asylum here. You also get ethnicity discrimination and religious discrimination, and depending on which political group you're part of. I mean, yeah, if the government believes that you're a spy for another country, that, you know, I mean, there's that lady who's in the news, Nazanin something. She's been in prison for so long because they think she's a spy. So, you know, just going back to make a point that it's a very oppressive country. And yeah, I think just briefly touching on some of the other countries. So you might be you might have some Albanian young people and Vietnamese young people as well, and Iraqi young people. With Syrian, it's kind of like a given because of the Syrian war. When it started, you'll get a lot of Syrian young people coming in, but mainly through with families, whereas with unaccompanied asylum seeking children, they're mainly from these countries, plus Albania and Iraq. So with Iraq, a lot of them will be Kurdish Iraqi, similar to certain ethnic groups. They will be kind of stateless because Iraq doesn't consider Kurdistan as a separate state, whereas Kurdish people, of course, do. They believe it's their country and they have a right to reside in there. And then with Albanians, you also get a lot of its blood feuds. It's a lot harder for Albanians to claim asylum, even if you've come here as a child. Their cases are very difficult, but a lot of it's to do with blood feuds or if you've been trafficked. And similar with Vietnamese, a lot of the Vietnamese children tend to be trafficked, so that the traffickers make them work on like cannabis farms, make them grow that, or nail bars, things like that. Just so you get an idea of some of the other countries where our young people are from. I thought I'd put that in there. Sorry, I've spoken so much, my throat is. So we thought, well, because we can't go out into a breakout room for some reason, we didn't get the option. We just thought we'd discuss as a group how you think the information given in this session and looking at countries and everything included might impact on a young person in your school or class. So yeah, just putting the question out there, in what ways do you think it will affect your young person in school if now knowing where they've come from, basically? You can just shout if you want.
Well, the behaviour in the classroom is definitely going to come out. I've seen that with the few that I have. And just having a little bit of compassion towards them, knowing what they've come from.
Yeah. And I think understanding as well, that this might be like the first time they're actually in a very stable educational setting. So these children might not have actually been in a class before. They might have just been in a madrasa with an imam holding a stick to hit them if they get a surah wrong, that kind of thing. Anyone else? I think someone put in the chat. Behavior and trust issues for them. Yeah, I mean, behavior. I mean, we'll go on to in other sessions about how their journey and everything will impact them, but also trust issues. When they first come into the country, they don't really know, or they've traveled through different routes and they've met several people that have maybe taken advantage or things like that. So knowing that they might have trust issues, and even if you work in a way to make them think to show them that you're working in their best interest, trust takes time for young people to build on that. But yeah, I just think the most important thing is like understanding a young person's situation, and being empathetic towards that is really important. Anyone else?
Shahanas, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I thought, so relating to trust, I suppose, for me, I would have thought it's quite important, particularly when a young person first arrives. I think a teacher in most countries that our young people are from, teachers are seen as quite authoritative figures, and I think a lot of our young people lack trust in authoritative figures. Again, as Shahana has said, we'll touch upon this when we talk about their journey and stuff. I think it even worsens their experience, but even within their own countries, authoritative figures aren't always seen as people that they can trust or people that may harm them. So I think that's something definitely to bear in mind.
Yeah, Jane just said language barriers. Yeah, I mean, language barrier is a big thing. I think sometimes as professionals, if a young person, they've come into a new country not really understanding what's going on, and it's the first time they might be in like an education setting, like a very professional kind of setting. If they don't understand things, it can be very frustrating because they might feel insecure that they don't know anything. They might feel that like they're stupid or something. And I think just being understanding that it's like their first time, or there's reasons for why they haven't got ahead, is a good thing to keep in mind. Sorry, I'm just reading comments. So Claire said, having an insight into the political and diverse religious situations in their country has been eye-opening, and we need to keep this in our minds when supporting them. We are worlds apart in the UK. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's this is just human, if you don't know about certain situations, we lead to like having a certain bias or certain opinions, whereas if you learn about it, then you kind of understand why certain things are the way they are. Kate said, UASC young people might naturally gravitate to other young people from their own culture, meaning they don't make friends with a diverse range of people. We see this with Albanian UASC boys. Yeah, I mean, that's very common. It's so common. You'll see loads of Afghans hang around with Afghans, and that doesn't help it because it doesn't really help with like learning English and things like that. But yeah, that is very common. Vietnamese tend to stick with each other. Even if, I mean, I've noticed this from my previous job. I in a charity setting where young people would come in and do activity, they would still be with each other. So Vietnamese would be sitting in one corner with each other and Albanians in another corner. So it's just what they know, and I think that familiarity maybe helps them in a setting that they've not been in. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. So we were going to feedback the 5 minutes from the breakout room, but just sort of looking forward beyond today. So today's, as we've said, is the first of a 4-part series. So the next session is on May the 19th, and we'll be looking at the journey of the unaccompanied asylum seeking young people. So we'll look at different potential journeys and different experiences that we know a lot of our young people have along those routes and how that may impact on them. And then the third session will be exploring the differences between unaccompanied asylum seekers and those who are born in the UK, so our Indigenous sort of looked after children that are in care, and we'll look at the sort of additional support that our unaccompanied asylum seekers need in comparison to other looked after children that you may work with. And then the last session is going to be mainly based around trauma and trauma-informed working, and it won't be a session based on prevent, but we will have a brief look at prevent and how that can impact on our young people as well. And then we just want